shirt and socks match, man. I said your shirt and your socks match.
Cool, man. Here's a quick picture of you. For the win today?
Every day.
Just a lineup.
Like Bruce Springsteen on it.
I really love it. I really love it.
Best part of the day. Thank you very much.
We're good to go? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Seated next to me today is Craig Martin, who's our Associate Deputy Minister for the Department of Industry, Energy and Technology. And Craig is one of the leaders on the team that's been responsible for the Crown Land call for bids for wind energy projects. It has been a busy 20 months for the renewable energy team, beginning with the launch of our renewable energy plan back in December of 21. Following the call for nominations of Crown Land in July of last year, we launched a Crown Land call for bids for wind energy projects in December of 22. Now, in the background of this, we have included a timeline of each step that we have taken. The call for bids closed on March 23rd, 2023, with 24 bids received from 19 companies. 4 bids were received after the deadline and were not accepted. 2 bids were for wind farms outside of the land reserve area and were disqualified. Bids were subject to a 2-phase assessment conducted by an evaluation committee with representation from IET, Finance, Indigenous Affairs and Reconciliation, Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro, a third-party financial and business analyst, EY, a third-party technical advisory, Power Advisory, a third-party project management and risk management analyst, which was EY, and a fairness advisor, which was Optimus SBR Inc. The first stage was a pass-fail assessment of the bids across key criteria, such as the bidder's experience and their financial capacity to plan and construct and to operate the proposed project. In July, just a month ago, 9 bids from 9 companies advanced to Stage 2. The 9 bids that progressed to Stage 2 were each assessed based on responses to 65 questions across 8 categories to identify a score and a ranking. Categories included bidder, project risk mitigation, electricity considerations and grid, community and Indigenous engagement, benefits, project schedule, and financing. The following factors were considered when comparing bids: the evaluation committee scores and score justifications, overlapping land between bids, power requirements and whether the grid could support the proposed project, and fiscal and economic impacts. As a result of the analysis undertaken, I am pleased today to announce the completion of the call for bids for wind hydrogen development in our province, and that 4 companies will receive wind application recommendation letters: Toqlukuti'k Wind and Hydrogen Limited, or ABO, EverWind NL Company, Exploits Valley Renewable Energy Corporation, and Energy GH2 Inc. ABO is proposing a 3-phase wind energy project in the Isthmus region to produce and export hydrogen ammonia with Brea Renewable Fuels through the joint development of green hydrogen production at the 𝐂�0.0 refinery. EverWind is proposing a multi-phase wind energy project to produce and export hydrogen ammonia from facilities on the Burin Peninsula. Exploits Valley Renewable Energy Corporation, or EVREC, is proposing a multi-phase wind energy project in central Newfoundland and a hydrogen ammonia production facility in Botwood to produce and export green hydrogen and ammonia. And finally, Energy GH2 is proposing a 3-phase wind energy project on our west coast and a hydrogen ammonia production facility in the town of Stephenville to produce and export green hydrogen ammonia. The construction, operations, and decommissioning phases of these 4 projects, which range from 35 to 40 years, are anticipated to have an overall economic impact in terms of GDP of $206.2 billion and revenue to the province of $11.7 billion. Based on project plans, peak employment is estimated at 11,694 full-time equivalents during construction, and the total capital spend is estimated at $66.3 billion. Projects will be required to have benefit plans with the province, including commitments to full and fair opportunity, as well as a gender equity and diversity plan that outlines proactive measures for the inclusion of women and other underrepresented groups. These plans will be required prior to EA approval. Further policy work is ongoing, and part of it also will be decommissioning plans that are required before Crown land is awarded. So in terms of next steps, today we have the issuance of recommendation letters to 4 bidders, which is the next step in the development of this industry in our province. And I want to make clear, this is not the green light for projects to begin construction today. These 4 companies now have the right to pursue development of their project and can proceed through the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador's Crown land application and approval process. Environmental assessment registration is required prior to final award of Crown land, and an environmental assessment will be required for these wind projects. Requests for connection to the provincial electricity grid to support hydrogen production and/or rates other than the published rates will be subject to PUB regulation. Newfoundland and Labrador has some of the best onshore wind resources in North America, which can be used to power wind turbines, generate electricity for industrial users and customers, through export through transmission lines, and the production and export of hydrogen and ammonia. I'm certainly pleased today to say that these 4 projects have been independently reviewed and determined to provide the overall greatest benefit to the province. I look forward to these moving through the next stages of review, and I'm excited about the economic opportunities that these projects will bring to the province in the years to come. I think that's it, all I have for speaking notes at this time, and I guess what I can do is certainly open it up for questions to myself and Mr. Martin. I'll leave it to, I don't know who determines who goes first.
I'm curious, you've named the 4 successful companies, but the entire 9 cohort was never named. Can you do that now?
No, that's not something that we plan on announcing, same as we didn't release the names from the earlier stage in terms of phase 1, based on advice that's been provided to us. So today we'll only be moving forward with the 4 that are receiving the WIN recommendation letters.
One of the companies that was unsuccessful today, Pattern Energy, has private land and can move forward with that presumably if they pass an EA. Are they open to Crown land in the future, and do you consider that project still viable after today?
So what I would say, I'm not going to get into any specifics of individual companies or other companies. I know there was a technical briefing, and there will be debriefings offered to all companies. What I can say is that the project put forward by Pattern, the first phase of the project was not reliant on Crown lands. So they have an opportunity. Again, theirs was based on land that was privately owned. They still had to deal with the issues such as grid usage, et cetera, but that's, that's outside of this today. So I guess I would leave it at that for now and see where that ends up.
How does the expected revenue generated by these projects stack up to the revenue we get from oil and gas?
I certainly wouldn't put it in the same category, and that's something I've been saying for years now when we talk about this. There is a great opportunity here when it comes to job creation, when the spin-off, the direct and induced benefits, but I would not put the revenue that the province will receive at the same levels the royalties we get under, our oil projects that are offshore. But again, when you're talking about the possibility of thousands upon thousands of jobs, when you talk about the revenue, there is revenue to come in, as I just listed there, but I wouldn't want anybody to confuse and be thinking this is going to be the same receipt of income as we get under oil project regimes.
On the note of employment and the big numbers that we're being told today, do we even have the people in the right expertise to fill these jobs?
That is a great question, and that's one of the bigger questions that we have been talking about all along, and I don't think it just relates to wind energy. It's a Canadian issue, but certainly when you're talking about the possibility of 4 new projects with thousands of jobs, it is a discussion that's being had and will be had. So I guess just a few points on that. Number one, I do think that the proponents obviously are aware of this. This is on them. They have, in some cases, have already been in touch with post-secondary institutions and advocacy groups such as Energy NL and Trades NL about what the needs are going to be. We talk within government when we talk about immigration opportunities, when we talk about education opportunities. This is a multi-department approach. So yes, I would be wrong to say that it's not a concern, but I always look at it, I would rather have thousands of jobs and try to find the people to fill them than the other side, which is have thousands of people and no jobs for them to go into. So we will continue to work on that with proponents, with industry. Talk to trades now on this. They're certainly excited for the opportunity, but now there's going to be a lot of work that goes into making sure we have the individuals and the skills and training that come with new projects in a new industry such as this.
So far, this is all talk. There's been lots of work done behind the scenes, obviously, but no contracts have been signed or anything like that. How confident are you that we are on the path now to becoming a major player, I guess, in the production of wind to hydrogen to supply the world market?
I am pretty confident that this is going to blossom into something that is of huge importance to this province. And one of the reasons is this is not an industry right now that is asking for subsidization by the province in order to make them viable. So just so people are watching out there, we have not invested. We are not subsidizing this industry. We are not providing these companies with money to prop them up. They are coming with private financing in the millions and into the billions. And in fact, some companies, as we all know, have already invested significant money already, even prior to being approved. So when I look at that, I say that they saw the risk and they saw the reward and took that. I can tell you that every proponent has invested money into putting this together. There is a ton of work behind the scenes to make this happen. When you look at the markets that are out there, I mean, you only have to go to any of these shows or any of these meetings to know that there is huge demand. It's going to grow. So I'm extremely confident, but like anything, that doesn't mean we don't have work along the way, that there won't be challenges along the way. But the other thing is, I think proponents have been waiting for this day. This is a signal to investors now that this is, that much closer to reality when they have the exclusive right to pursue development in this province. A lot of people have been waiting for this. This news is not just being received here in Newfoundland and Labrador. I can tell you that it's being received in multiple countries around the world. That we are ready to move forward.
You're talking about $66 billion in capital investment in this province. So you've been able to look under the hood now of these proponents, and obviously you've given them the green light to move to the next phase. So how confident are you that they have the money to get this done?
Well, what I would say is that, again, part of this, I guess the entirety of this was an assessment that wasn't just done by me or any politician sitting behind the desk. This was done by multiple departments and third parties, dedicated civil servants. Someone like Craig Martin here has been dealing with offshore royalties for decades. Not trying to age you, Craig. But everybody, a part of this was showing that you had the financial wherewithal to make this happen. This wasn't a sort of, just tell us what you want to do. This is why it took this long to get here, is because we went over this with a fine-tooth comb with multiple parties trying to make sure that this is a reality. And we end up with these four here today. And I don't think this is the end. I think this is just the first phase. I still think that there's future opportunity. One of the bigger issues as a part of this entire process was grid availability in terms of power needed to put these projects forward. That was one of the big factors in a lot of this. So we will continue, even with unsuccessful proponents today, we're going to continue to work with them to see if there's other opportunities here in the province at a later time. Not that we've set a date for phase 2 or the next round, but we see this as being the first one. And in fact, we've gained a tremendous amount of experience, certainly internally, in terms of what we need to move forward. So it's the culmination of a lot of effort. There's lots left to do, but this is a pretty big milestone here today.
What do you think of the idea of building a new diesel powered turbine somewhere on the Avalon, as hydro is studying right now?
Well, not something I prepared for today. I'll be totally honest. I know I've been completely consumed with this, to be honest with you. So it's not even something I've discussed with Hydro in the last couple of weeks. I'd be prepared to talk about it after, but to be completely honest, I've been totally consumed by this issue. Maybe my brain I don't have so much bandwidth to retain so much at a time. But this.
In principle, what do you make of having a new?
What I would say is that, it's easy to say we shouldn't be looking at diesel, but I also think that we have to look at the facts as we find them and deal with the big issue that I'm increasingly and always concerned with is reliability. So we can talk about renewable sources. So again, I defer to Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro for a lot of these conversations. Is one that we have to have again, I mean, power usage, when we look at, again, not a Newfoundland and Labrador issue, but I know like there's a lot of back and forth between the PUB and hydro and what to do next. So like I say, I'm not saying I'm completely against it. Obviously, it doesn't sound like what we want to do, but I think at some stage we need to make the decision, move forward, because people, again, want to have reliability.
You said grid access, sorry.
Go ahead.
You said grid access was an important factor here. We heard it was about 15% of the scoring. But is that where the winners sort of separated themselves from the losers, so to speak, in this process?
Yeah, so I mean, if I were to look at it from a couple of angles, I mean, obviously there was a scoring done. And basically when you look at it, if you scored, I guess you tie that in with the land that you were looking for. So if you have A and B that are looking for the same area of land, then you looked at the score. But in some cases, some of the proponents had an electrical request that is beyond our capabilities right now. So it may not have mattered what the score was. Obviously, it would have affected that score, that particular criteria in the whole grading process. But if it's not feasible, if Hydro's saying we just cannot accommodate this now at this time, obviously that's a pretty big factor going forward. And it did play a role in this assessment.
So that is that 15%, it's 100%. If you just can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not technically feasible based on the power availability that we have, then, yeah, it would only form part of the assessment, but there's the reality of it that it's going to prevent you from being able to move forward if we don't have the power.
You mentioned there's an intervention subsidy for this. There is a very generous federal tax credit that helps these projects. And of course, the Deputy Prime Minister was here earlier in the week and held a media availability, was talking about this very subject in very optimistic terms. And what I'm wondering is, why weren't you there for that?
Didn't know it was happening. What I would say to you is I've avoided going to any photo ops on stages, and I'm not belittling, don't get me wrong. I think it's amazing. If you have the Deputy Prime Minister that wants to come to your site, or the Prime Minister or some other federal minister, that's awesome. But we are involved in this process. So up to this point, I haven't talked to the feds. The feds on Monday or any other day had no idea where we were in this process. And if you're the Port of Argentia, or if you're Pattern or anybody else, you'd be honored to have decision makers come down. I do know that across the board, all proponents are obviously interested in federal investment in their projects. That's, I think, is going to be a necessary part for some of them. Like they need it and want it to make it happen. But no, I wouldn't be showing up at a particular facility 2 days before I planned on announcing this. Kind of would have put me in an awkward situation.
That perception that, I mean,
No, I didn't know, but I wasn't aware of it. No, geez, I wasn't aware of it.
When?
On Monday, I was in Port of Ask.
When might the people of Newfoundland and Labrador expect to see this province start to export hydrogen and ammonia?
Depends. I mean, you're better off asking the companies, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that have submitted timelines that they had to stick to. So we know that we want an expectation that they're going to move forward in Crown Land within 18 months. Each proponent successfully right now is in a different stage. World themselves have indicated that they have more aggressive timelines. We're talking about later 2025. Some are talking about a little bit later than that. I think there are factors that are going to play into that. I mean, right now, that's one of the considerations here is that, is everybody being optimistic? Are they being pessimistic? At the end of the day, our assessment was based on the information given to us, an independent analysis of that, and it made sense to us. We do think you can pull this off. We think you have the financing, the expertise. You've shown us all the different parts. I think we'll know a little bit more. Will timelines change as we go forward? It's hard to tell. But right now, the reality is we had to move forward to let these projects know that they do have that ability to make the next steps. They've been waiting for this, and I appreciate everybody's patience in waiting for this, but we needed to take the time necessary to do what we thought was a thorough analysis.
On the question of the,
Oh, sorry, I'm just going to go over here for a second.
World GH2, they certainly got out ahead of the game. They've already got their environmental assessment moving on. Did they gain any advantage by going so far and being so far ahead of the game, even though we know that other decisions still have to be made? There's no guarantee for it.
No, all I can say, there was absolutely no guarantee there. Anybody that has moved forward in parallel with what we're doing, there was a risk to that. So, like I say, all I can tell you is that the work we did was independent of anything being done by anybody outside of our process. All we said was, look, follow our process, submit the information we need, and we're going to make an analysis. We're going to do an evaluation of that, and then we'll put our decision out. So yes, I guess you could say that there was a significant risk to that, but I leave it to these individuals on how they weigh that. That's more of a company question, but in turn, it did not factor in one bit into our process, certainly.
Are there any provinces ahead of us? Are we the leader right now when it comes to this?
It depends. I mean, Nova Scotia obviously went through a very different process than us. Theirs was, much quicker for various reasons. I don't want to, take any shots here. I mean, they didn't go through the same. They went through a much quicker process, which means I don't know who else was involved in it. Ours was very much done by departments, analysis. We went above and beyond, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to making sure we were open and transparent and all those words. We went above and beyond, and I felt that was necessary. How far they are ahead depends. I know EverWind is actually over in that province doing some work. I haven't spoken to them. Right now, I can only concern us with where we are in this province. I think you're going to see some proponents today that are very happy that they've gotten this green light. I still think, too, that when you look at all the provinces, at the end of the day, very few provinces have the natural resource and other benefits that we have in terms of geography, ice-free ports, the actual wind resource, access to market, things like that. Some other provinces are just not in the same game as us. When we talk about the color, we had some provinces talking about gray and brown hydrogen. That's not where I think the market's going to go. Ours will be green hydrogen, which I think will be world leading.
On the question of the trip to Argentia again, would you have preferred to have gotten some notice about that, given one day later?
No, listen, at the end of the day, it doesn't factor in. It really was not relevant to what we were doing here. Same as any of the news any day. If anything, one of the difficult things through this process is that there's always a lot of talk about different projects here and there, and we have had to stay clear of that. We have not been able to talk about various projects or various actions being taken because we had to deal with what we had in front of us. So, that happening on Monday will be no different than some other proponent doing something before that. We didn't concern ourselves with it. It didn't factor into what we had to do. All I can say, though, is that the more attention is on this province, and I look at Placentia, they are just booming out there, and I think it's great for them. They are certainly on a world stage. They have a huge presence. So I think it's great that they have the feds down there looking at what they're doing. That's a good thing. But when it comes to what I'm doing today, the two things are not connected.
How far have you gone in terms of understanding the ammonia markets that these companies are saying they're going to feed into? I've seen communications with the federal government from the producers, particularly in Western Canada, who are concerned about new players coming online, saying if they don't offload into new markets, they may disrupt the ammonia market here in Canada, and that could cause problems on even down to food pricing. And I'm just wondering, has your government really dug into what these companies are doing in terms of potential knock-on effects, I guess?
Certainly we are aware of it, and I think that's one of the bigger factors that we're going to start hearing more of now as we move farther into the reality of this happening. That's a big conversation. Offtake agreements, what is the cost per ton, what's going to be sustainable. Do I know as much as these proponents? No. They are the ones at the end of the day are taking this risk. So do I know as much probably as they know? No. But we don't really bear much of the risk per se right now. But a lot of it, look, it's no different than the talk on other resources, like the various effects on a global scale. Certainly aware, but I think you're also going to see lots of changes as we move forward to reality.
I have a question in terms of land availability on Crown lands. It came up in the technical briefing, but I want to put it to you. The Burin Peninsula, that huge holding that's going to be there, is there any move by yourself, by folks within the government, to try and find, I guess, moments by which we can get that company to unlock some of those lands between now and the time that they actually are required to do so? It just seems like a very large, it's over half of what you have in reserve now.
Yeah.
And it's all for one company, and there won't be anything that can go on there other than these reserves.
So what I would say, there's a great question. So, and just to provide some context to anybody that might be watching or listening, so originally we held 3.6 million hectares in reserve. We've already sort of narrowed that down to about half of that. Right now, the entirety of these four projects is about just over 500,000 hectares of the original 3.6. What I would say is as we move farther, and companies may want to streamline some of what they're doing because every bit of land they have, they pay for. So if they can find a way to do it with less land, they are probably going to do that. And again, they also have to go through a Crown land application process. So I can't speak as much about that. There are going to be obviously some intensive conversations going on with Crown lands who reach out to various departments and assessments in terms of what land is available. So I don't think the story has been completely written on that. Our big thing is that we allotted, again, 3.6 million hectares. We're going to whittle that down. The 5 projects that are not moving forward today, those lands will eventually, not today per se, they will go back into, not being reserved, and then we'll see what happens with the remaining. They may want to modify that downwards. I'll leave that to them in their Crown land assessment.
Two of the companies that were unsuccessful today have pretty strong Liberal connections, as the one that was cut in the previous round. Do you think that mitigates some concerns people may have over the relatively close connection between World Energy and the Premier?
I'm going to say this, and I'm being as straightforward as I can be. The politics has played a zero role in this. I have no concern for anybody's connections of any political stripe or anything whatsoever, but I think we can back that talk up with the fact that the first thing we did was bring in a fairness advisor, someone impartial who at the end of the day, if we don't play ball right, they're going to write it up and everybody's going to know that we did something. If anything, I think a lot of that conversation that was going on about, that connection with World, if anything, I think that sort of spurred us to ensure that when this is all said and done, we have a process that stands up to any form of scrutiny. We do have a province that when it comes to energy development and, projects, we've got a bit of a, checkered past might be a diplomatic way of saying it. So again, I feel that we had to bring in a process that would stand up to all the levels of scrutiny. I think we've done that. And again, at the end of the day, I had a bunch of people, consultants, different departments, and you can see even in the fairness advisor, there's no political play in this whatsoever. We were presented with a scoring based on a number of factors. We took, these 4 and moved forward. So that's the best way I can put it. Now, do I think that's going to silence everybody? Hell no, not a chance. But again, I'm happy with where we are, and I can certainly sleep at night knowing that I think we did what was right.
Were there any lessons that you took from developing the oil and gas industry, or even Muskrat Falls, that you took forward in creating this process?
Well, someone like Craig might even be able to answer that. I had very little to do with the oil and gas development, that's for sure. I was around in the House when the Muskrat Falls project was going through. If anything, we had an inquiry into that. And yeah, I would say there's lessons learned. Part of it being transparency. Part of it being that, it's people's resources. They belong to the province. And we want to ensure that we follow all the necessary steps. The PUB is going to be involved in this. We've had fairness advisors. Everybody is going to have a say. But the other big thing, too, and I put that in because some people don't always get it, the province paid a lot of money for Muskrat Falls. And in this case, we are not expending province's financial resources. This is about companies expending theirs. The resources we have are water usage and land usage. It's a whole different ballgame. But to me, it's relying on a lot of very intelligent people to come together and hopefully make reasoned decisions. And I and we hopefully benefit from the work that all they've done. I get to sit up here, but the majority of this work were done by people like Craig and Susan Wilkins and Gordon and all, Newfoundland, Labrador Hydro. Jennifer's here. Other departments. I'd like to think it was a team effort to get us here, and it's going to require team effort going forward. There's still a lot of work left to do, but like I say, this is another sort of big milestone on that path.
When did the federal government find out who the successful bidders were?
I don't know. I haven't spoken to them.
Oh, so they're finding out when we find out?
Probably. No, I don't feel it's necessary for us. This is a provincial jurisdiction announcement. So I did everything I could to say that we are doing everything above board. So no, I haven't had conversations with my federal counterparts on these awards today. Just one less thing that I have to worry about. That being said, every proponent, I would imagine, is having conversations with the federal government on the incentivization, on the tax credits and things like that, as they should. I think the feds, I would assume, are going to be extremely pleased about us moving forward today. This, works in conjunction with, their sort of where they want to move in their direction. But no, I haven't had that conversation.
A lot of positives. We talked about the revenue, we talked about the jobs. We'd rather have them than not have them and have the people go searching for them. All of the positives that come with this, but just wondering, when the government looks at this new industry, which it is, it's a new frontier, embarking on it. Like you talked about Nova Scotia, they went pretty quick. Where are the risks on the inside? So like, what are we not, is there anything we're not asking here? Because you guys, you know much more about this whole process than we do. We might miss something. So what is your concern? Is it wind? Is it water availability? Is it land? Is it environment? Where does things go?
It's hard to put it. I mean, and I'm careful how I phrase things, because I'm very aware that sometimes take what you say and then try to, not you guys, but people take what you say and maybe they don't get the context or they don't get what you're trying to say. Everything has been a concern for us going through this process. Water usage, land, putting evaluation on resources. Are we doing the process right? Are we, people always say when you have resources, are you giving it away? That being said, I mean, I don't have those concerns sort of on a large basis, because we've had so many people involved to say that everything we're doing can be sustainable. Now, does that not mean that there won't be challenges going forward? Yeah, the Crown Lands and environmental assessment process is of its own thing. I don't get involved in that. There's a lot of concerns been expressed to me in terms of, outfitters or, caribou migration patterns. Valid concerns, but there's a valid process in which to undertake it, and you do not prevent development just for that fear. You have a process that takes the fear into consideration, takes the evidence both ways, and makes the decision. It's no different than we had Marathon out there, whose project was delayed for months because they had some caribou issues. So what did they do? They kept looking at it, and before they could get that assessment done, they had to come up with some mitigation efforts. So that might be the same here, but I can't comment on it because I don't take part in that process. What I'm saying is that there are still going to be concerns that are outlined going forward, but there's a process for people to put those concerns to, and there's a regulator that will look at that and make the best decision going forward. I'm just excited about the opportunity for new development of a new resource. We're leaders in this. We are going to be leaders in this. There's a huge job creation aspect to it. I think there's more, certainly far more benefit than there is risk in this stage. But our eyes are open the rest of the way. That doesn't mean that something won't come up. I mean, that's part of anything you do, that is sort of keeping an eye out for that. But right now, I feel very good about the eyes that have been on this and the work that's been done and the direction we're heading in.
Is there a path for unsuccessful bidders to partner with some of the successful ones, and I'm thinking more than one that come by chance?
I would, without having had a conversation, and I guess to echo something I have said in the past, I absolutely think partnership's an opportunity, and I use our neighbors as that example. So when Nova Scotia picked the winners of their hydrogen wind opportunities, some of the unsuccessful parties did partner with others. I think that's an opportunity here as well. What happens there is out of my control, but again, the other thing too is that, when we look at these unsuccessful proponents, I want to do what we can to keep alive the idea of investment in Newfoundland and Labrador. We're not just going to close the door to further opportunities. This is a path forward for some, but that doesn't mean the path is closed or other paths are closed to other investment in this province by world-leading organizations. I think we always had to be open to that. So, like I said, I don't think this is the end of the conversations. We'll see where it goes after today.
When the process started and you established this method for Crown Lands, some of the greatest interest in Crown Lands for wind development was in Labrador. I'm just wondering, when do you see Labrador and the folks interested in developing there getting their chance at something like this?
So, I don't think can be like the spokesperson on that, because obviously I think Indigenous Affairs, that department has a large role. Crown Lands Department has a large role. Do I think there's a great opportunity for development in Labrador? And I know that there's interest there, obviously. So I can't put the timeline on it, but when we're talking about working with our Indigenous partners, that just necessitates a longer conversation and a more in-depth conversation. I can't say how long it's going to take. To me, as long as I know there's an opportunity there, I just think it's incumbent on everybody to come together and figure out what the opportunity is and what does it mean? What does it mean for all the different parties? But
Is it tied into the politics though? I mean, you've got Churchill Falls and what's everything that's coming up there, you've got Muskrat, discussions around who gets the power from.
I'm sure it is tied into politics for some. I mean, you look at the power developments we have up here and the discussions, the issues that have come out of that. I will say that when I had one proponent a few years back talk about opportunities as it related, not for wind, but for Churchill, when we talk about Gull Island, I said, well, if you haven't had a conversation with the Indigenous governments, then that's the first step. You need to have that conversation before you come to us. Because sometimes if you do it in reverse, you're just creating an issue there. So look, this to me is about partnerships. I think there's a huge opportunity. I wouldn't want to see the opportunity wasted, but nor do I think it's on us to just plow forward sort of without taking into consideration leadership of Labrador.
You said that's a longer conversation, but is that also like an active conversation? Is that something that's in the talks now?
There are conversations going on, but what I will say is that the primary focus right now, a lot of the resource/bandwidth has just gone to this process. This has taken a lot of people. I mean, we started off with a renewable department of 0 people, and we've had to build that. And, we've gotten to a point where we've got a really great team. So it hasn't been as active as it should be, but for good reason. But again, I don't know necessarily, I don't think that's necessarily an IET-led conversation. I think it involves multiple government departments, including the Premier's office, as well as proponents, existing industrial customers. It's a bigger conversation. Like I said, I think there's opportunity. I'm just not sure who's going to lead that right now. And we've been sort of concentrated on what we have here in front of us, which has consumed a tremendous number of hours of a lot of people's lives over the last 20 months.
So devil's advocate though, if you are approving projects on the island that tap into our existing power, and we have a limited amount of existing power, aren't you forcing them in Labrador to either talk about a development at Gull Island or not have anything at all? I mean,
No.
they're gonna be last on the list to come to the table on this stuff, based on Crown lands, based on your decisions on what gets offered.
Our decisions. Yeah, no, you're saying your. Okay, thank you. No, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, that's putting it a certain way. What I think is that, look, when it comes to power in general, look, we've got a lot of conversations on what we do next. We're lucky in that we have a ton of opportunities, whether it's Gull, which is a huge opportunity, but has conversations come with it, whether it's Upper Churchill, whether we talk about Bay to Spare, whether we talk about other smaller scale developments. And I'm certainly not the leader on that. Again, we've got people within, we've got teams working on that, we've got conversations going on with other provinces. What I would say is, look, I do think absolutely that there's an opportunity for wind in Labrador, whether it's export or whether we talk about grid integration. There's even work that's going on there in terms of how do we bring that together. We have industrial development that is, it's going to necessitate extra power usage. Where do we come up with that? So it's a pretty big conversation. I don't, there's a lot of work left to be done on it, I guess is what I would say.
45 minutes.
Keep going.
I'm done.
Are we all good? Okay.
Have you started to look at the possible regulation of salt mines as hydrogen storage sites?
There is work going on in that regard, absolutely. That's the best I can put it now. It's definitely a conversation. It's certainly on our radar. Now I'm done? All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.